Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the major motion podcast where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Macaroni, and from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's Will Ashton. Hey, Will.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm always doing well when we manage to fit in an episode of Cinemaholics, but we got a different one this week by popular demand.
Well, I don't know about that, but you've been stressing me out because I don't know what we're talking about this week.
You're stressed? There's no reason to be stressed. We're talking about some fun movies. We're talking about not one, not two, but three.
My blood pressure is rising because you're just like, don't worry about it. And it's like, what am I not to worry about? You don't tell me what the show's about.
But for the listeners who don't read the titles of these things, I don't blame you. We're talking about Borderlands. We're also going to talk about Trap, the new M. Night Shyamalan, and we're going to talk about Dídi very briefly, I think. It'll be great. We'll probably do Borderlands, then we'll do Dídi, and then we'll do Trap. Because here's the thing. You saw Borderlands and Trap. Right. I saw Dídi. So we're going to be helping each other out a bit. Now, I really wanted to make sure we covered Borderlands because here's the thing. Yes, you're the only one who saw it, but I have a lot to say. At the same time, I do not want to go watch this movie. I'm sorry, Will. I know it's fun to watch movies with terrible reviews, I guess. We did it with Madam Web earlier this year. But this one genuinely makes me upset. Because I'm actually a fan of the games. I know you haven't played the games or anything, but it broke my heart in like the months leading up to this. I never saw the trailer, but I had such a clear feeling that something was wrong here. And it wasn't just because it was Eli Roth, which was obviously the first big red flag that he kind of came in and took over the writing and directing from. I think the rumor is that it was Craig Mazin, and he had his like name literally ripped away from the movie. That might have been a baseless rumor because I think he denied it, but then I saw some conflicting reports about that.
No, I thought he was involved. I think he wrote a script. I thought Eli Roth was still involved at that point, but I know for the reshoots, and this is where it gets kind of wild, is that this movie was shot long ago, or at least long enough that Cate Blanchett, when she finished the original production of this movie, had not yet finished filming, or hadn't even started rather filming Tar, and now like that's like what, 2 years old at this point,
right? So the filming for this was literally spring 2021, right, when they started.
Yeah, and then they did extensive reshoots, which Eli Roth didn't oversee because he was making Miller. Yeah, it was Tim Miller of Deadpool, the original Deadpool, and that was because Eli Roth was making Thanksgiving, which has also subsequently come out already, nearly a year to the date that Borderlands is finally coming out. So this feels just kind of just like a discarded baby, and watching the film, I don't find myself surprised by that.
Well, before I get your tidbits, because you know you did watch it, I want to set the stage just a little bit more, because so to be clear, there is a pseudonym writer on this project by Joe Cromie. I think this is like a pseudonym that's kind of been used before in varying ways. But what Craig Mazin has denied is that Joe Cromie is his pseudonym. So I think what he's saying is like he did do some work on it already, or did some work on the film before it was kind of arrested from him. But this other person might just be another uncredited screenwriter, according to Mazin.
Oh,
and for people who don't know, Craig Mazin was kind of the reason to be looking forward to this movie, because he has been very successful in the past with adapting video games into live action, which in the past he's done Last of Us, which of course the TV show, and he's worked on Chernobyl. That was like the thing that really kind of shot him from doing the like kind of like he had done a couple of things that were not as good early on. Yeah.
Famous video game Chernobyl.
Well, yeah, but Chernobyl is not a video game thing, but Mazin, I think he's kind of got a lot of acclaim for The Last of Us because he kind of did what people hadn't really seen much of before. Chernobyl was obviously a big hit as well, and I guess the surprising thing was that his other credits, it's been a little bit mixed. Like he did Identity Thief, and he did like he worked on like the Hangover movies, and honestly not a lot of great stuff. I'd say like Scary Movie 3 was good, but you know, that said, he's been kind of a writer to watch. I think he also is uncredited for Dune Part 2. Did a little bit of work for that as well. So all that to say, That's not what we're really getting with this. Mythic Quest. I knew there was another video game thing that I was forgetting that he worked on. It was Mythic Quest, which is not a video game adaptation, but something about video games because he's like passionate about video games. So anyway, all that said, Borderlands. Will, did you have any familiarity with the games going into this?
Somewhat. I mean, I remember. What was that?
You have a roommate, right?
Yeah, sure. He plays video games. He told me a little bit. He saw the movie with me, actually. He kind of kept me abreast on the various things related to lore and all that with the film and the game itself. But Borderlands was always the game, well, not always, but like was one of the few games that if I were to get into video games, I felt like that was one that looked appealing. And it's because the trailer had kind of like a Mad Max kind of feel to it. It kind of looked like a fun little kooky world where, you know, it's almost sort of dystopian and out there and strange. Like I knew there was like a sci-fi. Yeah, I knew there was like a sci-fi element to it, but it seemed more grounded and kind of like over the top in ways that I kind of liked. But watching the film, and I don't know if this is appropriate to the game or if I just had a misunderstanding of what the game was. It's definitely more in the vein of like Guardians of the Galaxy sort of knockoff, you know, like kind of like these degenerate, you know, outsiders, outlaws who kind of find company by teaming together to solve this mission and all that. And yeah, I mean, you know, it's if anyone thought, and obviously, I mean, that goes back to like Star Wars, obviously, but obviously kind of having more of like the edge and the spunkiness and kind of like the, you know, sarcastic, ironic tone lends itself a lot more to Guardians of the Galaxy than the original Star Wars. And I don't know, I mean, is that accurate to what the game or games were, or is that more of an invention of the film?
The aesthetic of it, sort of, because it takes place on, because you've seen the movie, so you have an idea of the premise and all that, but the setting is this like alien planet, and it's Mad Max in the sense that it's not that it's Mad Max in the sense of it's like it's a world that's become dystopian. It's more sort of like it's this barren world that a bunch of like pirates and roving people have tried to colonize, but it's completely lawless, and there are people who are just murderous and violent and insane, and there's a lot of cartoony sort of elements to it. It's very outlandish. And in the games, part of the fun is like it's a social kind of game. It's a game that really cut its teeth on friends playing together kind of toward like the end of the Halo era. So like Halo was one of those games that really started to, like, in the aftermath of GoldenEye, started to really bring like mainstream social gaming to first person shooters. So people started playing in their living rooms with like 4 TVs connected and all of that. Borderlands was one of those games that kind of came along in that era of now online gaming is becoming more of a thing. So this was like 2009, and more people are getting Wi-Fi, more people are playing these kinds of video games together. And what kind of separated this from the other ones, like Call of Duty was obviously like the huge one around this time, but Borderlands was a little bit more of like the edgy kind of like, oh, this is, you know, this game came out of nowhere. It wasn't based on any existing IP. It had a totally different art style, and it prided itself on not being realistic, right? So like if you play the games, like it's just super weird and ridiculous, and it's not trying to go for that realism, which is what a lot of the games at the time are trying to do. So I would play this game all the time with friends. Borderlands 2 came out. That was a huge hit as well. Borderlands 3 to less success. I think that the Borderlands thing just kind of got old after a while, to the point where, you know, this movie is trying to draw from that first game in terms of like the characters are straight from that first game. Not all of them though, I guess. It looks like they just borrowed like Lilith, and who Cate Blanchett plays, and then Kevin Hart plays Roland. Like those are like the 2 main ones that I remember from the games. And then I think Jamie Lee Curtis's character is from the games, but I would have forgotten, honestly. But anyway, point is, it's kind of, it suffers a little bit from, I think, not having the IP be as fresh and lasting, because it's not like Last of Us, where Last of Us is just like a movie video game, not a movie turn video game, but you know what I mean? Like it was always very cinematic, so it would always lent itself really well to live action. Whereas this, it was never like a plot heavy kind of thing. It was always very loose. It was a lot of jokes, and I get the idea to do a Guardians of the Galaxy thing, but from what I can tell, it goes way too far for the Guardians of the Galaxy aesthetic, down to the poster, the way they're sitting in the poster together. It's very Guardians of the Galaxy, very Suicide Squad, and that kind of feels tired to me. And I could see why they probably saw this and were like, yeah, like when they were trying to figure out, like they didn't do screenings for it. I think this was Sony originally, right? And then Lionsgate took it over, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought it was always Lionsgate, but I could
Maybe
be
it
wrong.
was. Okay. I think I just got confused. I thought Avi Arad was attached to it. And so I think I just got the Sony thing.
That's fair. He is a producer, probably the main producer on this film.
But you're right. It is Lionsgate Films. Yeah.
I don't know what's going on with him and Sony, if they're having a falling out, or if it was like a Joel Silver or Jerry Bruckheimer thing where he's just kind of bouncing different studios now, or how that's working out. But nevertheless, yeah, I mean, I kind of figured it was more character based than story based, and I feel like in a broad sense, you would think that'd be better as far as like translating it to a film, because it doesn't feel as beholden to the game structure, and that you can make something, like you were saying, a little bit more cinematic and kind of lending itself to what people like about the games, but not feeling beholden to them. But yeah, I mean, I think the big thing there, if you're going to compare it strictly to Guardians of the Galaxy, is that for as much as Marvel and the MCU have been sort of auteurless outside of the production of Kevin Feige and felt like they don't really have a distinctive voice, the Guardians of the Galaxy movies are among the better MCU movies, I think, because they feel very distinct to James Gunn, who was able to, I think, have that sort of anarchic, sort of prickly vibe that he had from his original films, going back to like his work with Trauma and, like Super and Slither and all that, but with a sort of newfound and renewed sense of earnestness and sincerity that, made it palpable to a wide audience and made a property that wasn't really that well known into something that is like one of the most mainstream blockbusters of the last decade. And yeah, I mean, I think it was, his talents as a writer and director that made that an actual trilogy that is worth championing and may actually stand the test of time more than a lot of other MCU movies, probably because they are, generally speaking, more standalone. But I think with this movie, it just, as we're kind of alluding to before, it doesn't feel like it has any real ownership to any one person. Everyone seems kind of embarrassed on screen and off to be involved with it, with the exception of Jack Black, who
he was embarrassed. I saw his late night interview. He was literally at the end there. He was like, "Oh yeah, I'm supposed to be promoting a movie here," and you can tell he did not want to talk about this movie.
In any case, I think he is a consummate professional then, because he seems into it in a way that most of the other actors on screen, including, genuine, real talented people like Cate Blanchett, who my roommate and I were talking about this, and I don't know if it's a reshoot thing or just a general, like, she didn't really know what to bring to the character, but like, she just seems kind of stiff and bored in a way that you just don't really expect from Cate Blanchett. And, knowing that she would go on in between the production cycles of this to do Tar, which is like one of her best, most acclaimed performances, this shows, I think, I don't know. I mean, she claims that she was a fan of the games and that she came into this not as like a paycheck, but rather like as someone who wanted to actually do a good adaptation of this game that she likes. I don't know how much that's true or not, but I think whatever good intentions or whatever desire people had going into it, it just feels very juiced out. Like it feels like a shell of itself. It feels like very corporatized. It's PG-13, which, I mean, I'm assuming the games are rated M for mature.
They're pretty violent. So yeah, it's supposed to be pretty, blood spattering.
Right.
Not like super gory all the time, but kind of.
Right. But yeah, I mean, it's a very aggravating film because it's very aggressive in its badness. Like, it's just very much like, it doesn't stop. It doesn't slow down. It just has, bad joke after bad joke. And it just gets very tedious and boring after a while. And like, even Jack Black, who is, like keeping with it and, bringing a little bit more life to this movie than it has otherwise, even he doesn't really do enough to like make this really feel justifiable in any particular sense. The other actor who I think actually does seem at least somewhat into it, and I have to look up their name because I'm not familiar with them outside of this film, is a young performer named Ariana Greenblatt, who plays Tiny Tina.
She was in Barbie.
She
was the kid.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah. She was also in Love Monsters, I'm looking up here, and I remember liking that movie as well.
She's kind of starting to break through a little bit. She was in Ahsoka, and she has shown up in a bunch of other like big things, but smaller roles here and there. But yeah, this is supposed to be a bigger role for her.
Right, and I think she was hoping it would be. So she's bringing an energy and enthusiasm that is otherwise lacking. And I just feel bad for her because, I mean, like, it's not like it's a bad performance or anything, but just it's a grating, fairly underwritten character that's kind of going through some heavy tropes. And just, I don't know, it's not really clear if it's supposed to be more like funny or cutesy with her. And yeah, you're supposed to be sort of endeared to all these characters and sort of like them in spite of their weaknesses. And the more time you spend with them, the less you like them. So it's just, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to keep lambasting this film because I think a lot of people have already. It has like a pretty low Rotten Tomatoes score from what I have heard. But yeah, I can't say this one lived up to any sort of potential that may or may not have had from the video games.
Yeah, I think there are two main culprits to this movie's downfall from what I've seen on my internet sleuthing. One of the things that I think screams like, is this was kind of filmed in the aftermath of like the height of the lockdowns. And so people have speculated that the cast was a little bit raw. They had issues with the production when they were filming. Vaccines were still kind of slowly rolling out. And I think that there were just a lot of logistical issues. And I think people's headspaces were just like not quite where they needed to be. I know you mentioned kind of Kate Blanchett seems a little bit like, not fully herself perhaps. And I think there was an interview where she talked about that, where she's like, she was dealing with like a COVID madness. So I don't know. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but your guess is as good as mine. The other thing is that I think this movie clearly was supposed to be longer based on what I've seen. And part of what happened with the reshoots was like they were there so that they could shorten this movie as much as possible. I think what they saw was basically like the movie didn't work. Once they finished it, it was too long. So they knew that the movie would get bad reviews, and they did reshoots, I think, in order to bring it down to under 2 hours so that they could just juice whatever money they could, basically. And that's kind of been the strategy, I think. And I think that's why like no screenings for this thing. They just wanted to have like a splashing opening weekend as they could before the word got out, and just get all the Borderlands fans there before, the movie would do its thing. And as a result, it's going to be a huge bomb, I think. And I think they saw it coming. So big blow to Lionsgate for sure. But the budget reportedly was as high as 120 million. This thing only cracked 10.2 million in the box office over the weekend, roughly. So that is really bad.
Yeah. And I mean, you've been talking a little bit, or you've been suggesting that like video game adaptations, but whether on TV or in film, I don't know if they're fully making the progression to being like respected art outside of a couple, notable exceptions. Like I think The Last was probably the most acclaimed at this point. But, I think we've gotten to a point where like movies like Detective Pikachu and the Sonic films and a few others are like, not maybe great films necessarily, but like you can make a passable video game movie.
They're
now.
Viable. They can be viable.
And I
can get a Super Mario Brothers movie making over $1 billion at this point.
Right. And I mean, I'm not purely talking about like from a commercial standpoint. I just mean like quality wise, you can get something that's not sure to be just absolute dog water at this point.
Yeah.
And this feels like a return to like the 2000s era where like stuff like Doom and Resident Evil and like Alone in the Dark came out, where it's just like, oh God, how are they going to mess this up? Like it just feels very like you say, it's a big budget, but it feels kind of cheap. All the actors don't really like, it has that old quality of like 90s video game movies where you get like thespians like Bob Hoskins or like, I don't know, like Jeremy Irons or something for like, I know it's Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm just trying to think of like, like these older genre films where like thespians are just kind of like, what is this? Like, what are we doing here? This is all very silly, but they have to kind of keep a professional face. It has that vibe for it. And I mean, if you're nostalgic for that kind of era of video game movies, in the way that like the Sony recent Marvel movies kind of feel like a throwback to like the 2000s, 90s superhero movies where they didn't know what they were doing. I mean, go for it. I mean, it might get something out of this movie. I generally found it just to be kind of exhausting and boring for the most part. And boring is a weird word to use for it because there's just like always stuff happening, but it's so tedious and so, heartless in a weird way. It just feels so cynical in its intention that it just, it's hard to get invested in. It just gets dulled out pretty early on. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, the only thing I will say in the positive favor for the film, other than I do think the special effects for Claptrap are pretty convincing. Like, I never really thought of him as a special effect. Like, I think it's pretty good how they're able to incorporate him into a given scene. Is that I don't think he gave a good performance necessarily, but I do think it's interesting and worthwhile that Kevin Hart is not really playing the like comedic character here. He's not like doing the traditional like I'm the short guy yelling at everything sort of thing. He is playing it straight. Like, I know his character in the game, from what I've heard, is like not your typical Kevin Hart character, and it seems like this is him at least trying to kind of branch out as an actor and play something, outside of his comfort zone. And even if it doesn't necessarily work, it's at least interesting to see him try to do something different as opposed to his usual stick. So I'll give it those two things in addition to whatever fleeting compliments I gave before. But
that's good to hear, just because I mean the character itself is like so boring in the video game. Roland is he's just meant to be, here's the character you play if you've never played a video game, because he doesn't really have any personality compared to the other ones, and so he's usually the stock soldier character. So I can see why Kevin Hart kind of was like, all right, well, he's a blank slate, I can do whatever I want with the character. You did mention the board thing, so real quick, Matt Donato, here's what he had to say. He said, Borderlands is a catastrophic disappointment that plays like hacked to pieces studio slop, betraying everything fans adore about Gearbox Software's franchise in derivative, regrettable fashion. Not an ounce of life in this ugly husk of IP filmmaking, more like a Borderlands. Waka waka. So Matt said bored.
Yeah, I saw at least 3 people do Borderland or whatever the pun may be.
Matt Donato did it on August 7th. So sure. High five, Matt, friend of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Randy Jones, gotta shout out Randy, because Randy killed it with theirs. They said, what you get when you order Guardians of the Galaxy off of Temu. And F expletive Temu. Perfect. No notes. Okay. Rotten Tomatoes game. Did you?
All right.
This was a big news story, the Rotten Tomatoes score for this one. So did you hear about it?
I did. I heard about it. Like, my roommate told me the score. I heard about the score on Twitter. I think I was just looking at YouTube earlier today, and I saw the Red Letter Media review of this movie has the Rotten Tomatoes score in the thumbnail. I know it always is subject to change, and that's very flexible. But last I had heard, to be upfront, it was like at 6%. I don't know if it's changed since then. Well,
it was 0% at first.
Right.
And I'll give it away. It's no longer 0%. So I'll let you do your guess. But it is just kind of funny because literally I went to Rotten Tomatoes just now to type in the name of the movie, and instead of Borderlands, I typed in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, man.
So yeah, on that note, what do you think the Rotten Tomatoes score is? We have 110 reviews counted.
I mean, like I said, I heard it was 6, and I'm going to assume it didn't go up. If anything, it might have gone down to I think at one point it was 4%. So I think going to 6 was maybe a slight bump for it, but I'll say 6 just because that's what I've heard.
Nope, it did go up. It is 8%. So slowly but surely.
Maybe it'll make the double digits.
Yeah, I just real quick, I do want to see who gave it a positive.
I know Grace Randolph was the first positive review, which some people were saying that's worse than getting a 0%, as if the only person that liked it was Grace Randolph.
Oh, so true. Yeah, I'm seeing there's somebody who critic I've never heard of. I mean, yeah, these are just, I think these are fringe ones that are kind of just trying to get traffic. The only one I'm seeing from a bigger outlet is Polygon. So yeah, Polygon give it a fresh tomato. So okay, there's that. Okay, so then what do you think, Mr. Will, the audience score is? We do have some ratings for that. We have 500 plus verified ratings. What do you think?
Well, Polygon, I should say before I get into that is kind of more techie, right? Isn't that more kind of don't they do a scattering of different things like video games and movies and shows and books and all that?
Sure, but I consider them a legit, they do good coverage of things.
I consider them legit. I just didn't know if
okay,
they were more
I
sympathetic.
thought you were taking shots.
No, I thought they might have been more sympathetic because they talk more about like games and tech, or maybe
Well,
like
that's the thing. I would expect them to be way harsher, just based on.
You would think. I'm just trying. I was just trying to see if there was logic without reading the review.
I hear you.
I was trying to see if that was the logic. Anyway, audience score. I feel like this is going to be one of those times. And I actually don't know the audience score. I didn't hear it, but I have a feeling this is going to be one of those times where, because it is a sort of snappy, like palatable to broad audience sort of things, like stand it off to be as like commercial as possible, that the audience score comparatively is going to be higher. That's not to say like, I don't think it's like 95%, but I think it's going to be like 78%, just because like audiences are going to be like, yeah, it wasn't that bad. Like, yeah, I had a fun time. My kid liked it or whatever. So that's my guess. I'm going to say like 75%.
Way off. 50%.
Okay.
I think the thing that you're not factoring in is the fan base. They're the ones who showed up, even in Vegas, to watch this. And I think they're the ones who are going to be the most disappointed. Yeah. I think like you're right about like average moviegoers are probably like, yeah, it was fine. Hour 42. Mm-hmm. What did I really lose? But folks who are familiar with the games probably a little bit like, man, they really messed this up. And like now we can't get like a cool Borderlands movie because they ruined it. I think that's how I personally feel just from the news of it.
Sure. I mean, granted, 50 is a considerable jump from 6 or 8% or whatever it was before.
Yeah. True.
But yeah, nevertheless, still rotten.
Yeah. Especially for audience score. I mean, that's pretty abysmal. What do you think the cinema score is? I kind of gave you not a hint necessarily, but a little bit of like a nudge.
I'm going to say a C-.
Pretty close. D+. So a little bit lower. So you overestimated that time. Let's see if you can balance things out for the Rotten Tomatoes average. 25,000 watches on Letterboxd. What do you think the average rating is, 0 to 5?
I gotta assume this is pretty low. Like even lower than the audience score for Rotten Tomatoes. I'm gonna say like 2.0.
Also pretty close. 1.8. So a little bit lower once again. This one, it's pretty rough. So that is less. That's much less than half. Not 6%, but that is Borderlands. We have another movie to talk about. Hopefully a better movie. I'm going to talk about Dídi real quick. And I mean, I know I can't say it's a better movie because I didn't see Borderlands, but I can use my brain and logic and common sense. But this is a bit of an indie in between Borderlands and Trap. Will, what do you know about Dídi? Do you know about the Sundance stuff and all that?
Yeah, I know it's Sundance. The filmmaker is Sean Wang, right?
That's the guy, Sean Wang, who's done short films before this, but this is his first feature debut. Right,
because I saw one of the documentary shorts this year at the Oscars was directed by him, and I saw it.
99 Waipo?
Yeah, I saw that. I saw his, and that was cute.
That was cute?
I don't know if it deserved a nomination, but it's a lovely little film, to be sure.
Okay. Yeah, so Dídi is kind of his big splash. It won the U.S. Dramatic Audience Award at Sundance. And this one I definitely wanted to make a point to see because it very much is based around my neck of the woods out here in the Bay Area. So this is a very Bay Area film. So when I say Bay Area, though, I'm not talking about San Francisco. I'm talking about Fremont, California, which I wrote. My review for this movie just came out on In Between Drafts, which you can read. But in that review, I lovingly referred to Fremont as the armpit of the Bay Area in terms of its location. And it's a little tongue-in-cheek. For people who don't know, Fremont is one of those weird places where it's not a very famous Bay Area place. Like when you think Bay Area, you think like San Jose, Oakland, San Francisco, of course, maybe Palo Alto, if you watch that movie, I guess. Menlo Park, where Facebook is, all that stuff. Whereas Fremont is kind of in like the nether zone, sort of. It's like in between Menlo Park and like where Meta is. It's in between that and the rest of the East Bay, which is getting like my neck of the woods. Will, you've been out there, so you've seen the area for yourself. And Fremont is where Tesla is, for example. So that is unfortunate. But speaking as a not Tesla fan, Fremont, though, also weirdly, I don't know if you know this, Will, Fremont, California is considered, I think, number one in terms of like happiest places to live in the country, in terms of like people being, quality of life, crime, income, all that stuff. Fremont is Fremont's kind of killing it, I guess. I don't know. I mean,
Uh,
you wouldn't know it by going there. It's so unassuming of a place.
But maybe that's part of the charm, right? Is that like, it's kind of secluded, but also near all these cool things, great weather, good vibes, I'm assuming. Yeah, if it wasn't like a fairly expensive part of the country to live, I would assume.
Right.
I could see it being a very, habitable place to be.
Well, the movie itself is sort of like a period piece. It's kind of like if you took Lady Bird and you mixed it with like Minari, essentially, or Boyhood. It takes place in 2008, and it is such a 2008 movie. A lot of the fun of this movie, which follows this 13-year-old kid named Wang Wang. He goes by Wang Wang, but his name is Chris Wang. And the whole, there's a lot there in terms of his name, his Taiwanese American identity, and growing up in this kind of, Fremont, which a lot of Asian people, but also a lot of white people as well. And that's kind of what makes the Bay Area an interesting place. Fremont in particular is that kind of intersectionality of like the white tech class and the like Asian second, third generation class, which also overlaps with the tech class. It's like a whole thing there. But Dídi is a kid of the late 2000s, right? And I think closer to your age around that time. So like I was 17 in 2008. So I think you were what, like 14, 15? Because I'm just a little bit older than you.
Yeah,
I don't want to date you, but
yeah, I was gonna say I was in my freshman year of high school between like 2007 and 2008. So
right. Okay, so this
right,
kid is
yeah.
like a year younger than you were at this time, I think, because he's
Okay.
starting his freshman year of high school, fall 2008 is how this movie has it. Yeah, but regardless, you can kind of like there are a lot of 2008 isms here. Another movie this reminded me of was mid 90s because it's like those hot summer days of like youth, so the transition from middle school to high school being kind of like in that weird, like I put it this way in my review. I think that like 6th, 7th grade, it's like the most awkward time of your life for most kids. I know for me, it was super awkward. You don't know yourself yet. Your body is changing. You are struggling to kind of figure yourself out. Everybody has different experiences. I know for me, like, and my friends, like, it was just a rough time. It was just like you don't have a lot of freedom quite yet. You're still viewed as a kid. It gets easier though, right, as you transition into high school. So I feel like this was like the second most awkward time of life. So that period between middle school and high school, you're a little bit older. You have a little bit more independence. You've kind of like figured out, like, for me especially, and this kid, like, you have more friends. You're a little bit more sure of yourself, but not quite. And you're starting to kind of develop your passions. So this movie is supposed to be very autobiographical, based on Sean Wang's experiences. He also wrote the film, I should say. And Carlos Lopez Estrada, Blind Spotting, by the way, co-produced this. And so, and of course, for people who don't remember, Blind Spotting, another huge Bay Area movie, because that was Oakland and all that. But anyway, when I mention all those movies, it really is kind of mixing a lot of that like kind of indie cred of a movie like mid-90s or Lady Bird, of like taking this specific period of time and trying to process like the angst right through what was unique about 2008. So the things that were unique about 2008 were AOL Instant Messenger. There's a lot of that here. There's a lot of, this kid has MySpace and he figures out that he needs to get a Facebook account in order to become friends with the girl he has a crush on. Right. So like there's a lot of that. Remember in like those movies like Searching, where you spend like in that movie the entire time just kind of navigating a computer screen. Well, this movie, it does that, not the whole movie, but it has like set piece scenes like that. So like Wang Wang will go to his computer and then you're doing the searching thing for a bit. And it's the same kind of cinematic technique where you're getting to know this kid who barely talks for like big stretches of the movie. He's very internal, he's very introverted. But you see more of his personality and his thought process when he types something and then deletes it, or when he blocks somebody after typing out something vulnerable, So like there's a lot of that going on. I think one of the most unique things about this movie, and I should say it's really good. It's just a very good, very solid, strong movie. I'm really proud of it, coming out of, this area. And it's something that I think a lot of people around here are very excited about because it's about us and it's good. I don't mean us like me, since I didn't really grow up here, but I was adopted by the darkness. But the movie itself, I think, is successful for really like how it's able to like balance its unlikableness. Because this character, he's tough to root for. Like Dídi is what his family calls him. It's Chinese for younger brother. So again, there's so many things in this movie about people's names, but his family calls him Dídi. And he is kind of like, he's dumb. Like he's very stupid because he's that age. He's very socially awkward. But then there are times where he like succeeds and you're just like your little brother, you know, you're just like, heck yeah, man. There's an older sister character and she's kind of like the surrogate character for this movie, like the audience surrogate, where you're like, you kind of view him the way she does, where you're like, man, what a little jerk. But like as the movie continues, she starts to see like, all right, you know, I got to look out for this kid. Like he's my problem. He's my mess. There's a mother character in this because of course. And if I had to lay anything at this movie's feet, I think the stuff with the mother, I mean, it feels so Oscar-real. I mean, it really is just like really trying to Laurie Metcalf this thing. And it's tough because it's really well done. Shirley Chen plays his mother and she is phenomenal. The writing of it is a little bit tired, but the execution is fantastic. So I'm very conflicted about that. But again, like there are multiple scenes where you're just like, you know, and the Oscar goes to like, it's doing that. Not that I think this movie necessarily would get any Oscar attention. I think it's a little bit too low key for that. I don't think it's a Minari in that sense, but it's certainly, you know, in this, it's in the qualifiers if we want to do the Olympics thing. But yeah, great movie. A lot to talk about here. One of my favorite aspects of this movie is the way, and I mentioned this in my letterboxd, this movie is sort of about how, especially in that era, we all use like YouTube to like learn how to do things creatively. There's like big stretches of this movie where it's just so realistic about filmmakers and artists in general and how we start. Because you know what I'm talking about, where it's like these movies have like this character has like this innate gift. They've been shooting movies like, think of like the Fabelmans, right? Of just like, it's like a magic mystical thing of like, since they were 3, their mind just works differently. This movie is just like, okay, he clearly has a passion for film, but he sucks at it. And he's trying to get better by like making it up as he goes along. And it's so much more realistic that way. So that when he does kind of do things and it works out and it's actually kind of good, you're like, oh, wow, he like legit earned that. It wasn't like a Fabelman's thing where it's like, he's like a prodigy, which I get it. Like that movie has its place. I'm not knocking it, but I just like how this movie is a little bit more like Sean Wang being pretty humble about it and just being like, yeah, you know, he didn't know how to film skateboarding. So that he just went on YouTube. It was like, how do you do this? Mm-hmm. And he kind of half-asses it. And then even his friends are kind of like, man, this isn't that good. And so it's, I don't know. Sure. There was just something kind of charming about that. So charming is the word for this movie. I do recommend it. I think it's going to be hitting wide release this week or hitting more theaters this week. And I think you would get a kick out of it, Will. I'm not saying it's something that you need to like run to the theater as fast as possible or anything. But if you have a chance to see it, I'd give it a chance. It's a good time.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say it seemed like based on the trailer that he was making like amateur jackass videos is kind of the vibe
kind
they sell it on.
Yeah,
is that what the movie's like?
Yeah, it's kind of like well, 8th Grade is another movie that this harks to. You know, right. So 8th Grade was more contemporary for when it was made, but like that same kind of like, you know, she's making these kind of like bad videos, but they're so sincere, right? And it's like so her, and like that's what's good about it.
Well, I mean, with that movie, though, it seemed like nobody was watching or like maybe 2 people.
Well, that's the case here, too. So it's not that different.
Well, I think you're implying that like people, like not a ton of people, but like some people have watched them, but they're all like, this sucks. Like, why are you doing this?
Well, no, he's asked to like make some videos for this group of friends that he's trying to make. And he kind of is like talking a big game about how he can do it. And he doesn't do a bad job, but he makes like one mistake and it like kind of, I won't give away the rest, but it's kind of cringy. I mean, there's a lot of cringe in this movie, but like there was a moment in this movie where I had to look away. I was like, you know, I've been less scared in like, you know, a Saw movie than this.
Sure. I get you. Yeah. Yeah, no, it sounds very sweet and appealing. Yeah, I'm honestly kind of this is Searchlight, right? This is an A24.
This is Focus Features.
Oh,
but
Focus,
it does have an A. Yeah, I mean, it's very Focus Features / Searchlight / A24. Like that kind of overlap that those can have, you know?
Yeah.
There's a little zone there for this. But this is the epitome of like Sunday afternoon indie, 100%. Where you're just like, I just want to watch something I know I'm going to like. and it's going to fill Sunday afternoon, and I'm not, come out of it
Sweet.
feeling something about the human experience.
Sounds like a quality time at the art house.
That's right. 91 minutes too. Very, very brisk. Does not wear out its welcome. And I love the ending so much. There's like
Nice.
an ending moment where I'm just like, this kid is never going to let me down. So yeah, that is Dídi. And then I got to give a big shout out to the Isaac Wang who plays the main character. No relation apparently to Sean Wang, but he just absolutely, I mean, he's just really good in this, like for his age, especially. The cool thing about this movie too is a lot of first time actors from around Fremont. I mentioned in my review that I would have gone, but I was busy that day. Not really. I didn't know anything about this, and it is kind of wild because I know a bunch of people who are connected to this movie for that reason. So one of the actors was here in town. I don't live far from Fremont, so one of the actors was like around here for like a special kind of like extra screening for the movie. I didn't get to go, but there's the director. Like literally the officiant for my wedding, like went to high school with him, like knows him pretty well. So like it's one of those things. I think, Will, this has happened to you, where like for some reason, where you live, like all of a sudden, like you see stuff, right? Cha-cha real smooth. It's like, that's your parking lot or whatever. I don't remember where, community center or something. There's very much that for me right now. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool. Right on.
You'll recognize stuff. You were out here. I hope you had a good time when you came to visit.
I did. Yeah, I had fun times in California. Both times I went for 2 different weddings.
We don't have to play the Rotten Tomatoes game for this one because I already know.
Okay.
But I'll just tell you. Well, I feel like you wouldn't be able to guess, but 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, 100 reviews counted, so pretty high, which I'm happy to see. I mean, it is one of those movies that's like, I guess, critic approved by definition. But again, I don't think that's to say that this is easy. I just think that Sean Wang he has a gift, I think, for, taking the specificity of this area and like a specific Asian identity experience in one location and doing what, what's his name did with Minari. Was it Alan Yang? I think it was his name. Oh, I think I have that wrong, actually, because I think he was the one who did Master of None. So I'm messing that up. Sorry. But yeah, that kind of thing.
Well, he just did the guy that did Twisters, Lee Isaac Chung.
Lee, thank you. Perfect. And then I'm going to check the Letterboxd right now, but I have to assume the Letterboxd is like pretty good because this is such a Letterboxd kind of movie. Is it playing in your area, by the way, anytime soon?
Oh yeah, it's playing now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about going to an early screening that was like at 11:30 or so, but I didn't know if I'd be back in time. To record. Little did I know that we would be recording a little bit after that, so I wouldn't have to worry about that, but oh well.
Oh well. But hey, if you do get to check it out, I want to hear your thoughts. But actually, this has more watches than Borderlands. That is fantastic on Letterboxd, I should say. 28,000.
I imagine that's probably because of the film festivals, but
exactly.
Also not surprising.
Not surprising. And yes, a 4.1 Letterboxd average rating, which is very good. Very awesome. All right, and then we'll finish this out. We have one more movie for y'all. This has been a little triple threat for everybody. This is a movie you saw that I did not see. It's called Trap. And this came out a couple weeks ago, right? I want to say August 2nd.
Maybe. It's like a week and a half now when we're recording this, I think.
Yeah, 10 days.
Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing well in terms of box office. It's made more than its budget at this point. So this is the latest M. Night Shyamalan movie. He wrote, directed, and co-produced it. It stars Josh Hartnett, Ariel Donahue, Seleka Night Shyamalan. Interesting. Haley Mills and Allison Pill. I did not know this movie was coming out. Literally like 3 weeks ago. It came out, and all of a sudden, I just started seeing stuff about this movie everywhere. I'm not sure what the story is. Like, is that because of me? Like, I'm just not clued in these days, or did this movie really come out of nowhere? And what happened here?
Well, it's Warner Brothers. M. Night Shyamalan, for his last 2 films, was working with Universal, and then he recently struck a deal producing and directing films for Warner Brothers. And part of that deal was one of his other daughter, I believe, made her directorial debut earlier this year with a film called The Watchers, which he produced.
Right. But wait. He did a movie with Warner Brothers before. He did Lady in the Water with them.
That could very well be true. I'm just saying recently he's switched over. But I think Warner Brothers, just because of their current financial situation, doesn't really like, unless it's like a Barbie, doesn't really like market their movies extensively as much anymore. I feel like they're trying to cut costs where they can. Like I'm thinking about like Aquaman last year, where it's like we didn't even see ads for that until like maybe a couple months before it was supposed to come out or whatever. I don't know. That could be the reason why, or maybe you're just out of the loop because you've been traveling the globe and not paying attention to the movies. Either one's possible. But this
both
movie,
are probably true then.
this movie is sort of like a trilogy closer of sorts, a spiritual trilogy that M. Night Shyamalan has done, where his last three films, Trap, prior to this he did Knock at the Cabin, and then Old, all center around these adult figures who are with their kids and find themselves in these sort of extreme or supernatural or kind of over the top situations where they kind of find themselves put to the test, not only in terms of their loyalty, but also just kind of like melancholically reflecting on how they've been as a parent, how they've been in life, how they've been able to balance their personal and professional ambitions with their family lives. And I think it's been a very kind of fruitful period for M. Night Shyamalan. I know you and I have sort of disagreed on this. I know you weren't a fan of Old, which I wasn't able to join you on that conversation. I know you weren't a fan of Knock at the Cabin either, which I also liked. I think those are two of his best in recent years. And I think he's really kind of found a stride for pushing himself in his technical prowess, tightening his story structures, and allowing himself to kind of be contained by sort of these budgetary restraints where he's producing these movies on his own, but distributing them with major labels like Warner Brothers and Universal, as you mentioned, to keep a kind of refrained budget that doesn't allow him to do something like After Earth or The Last Airbender, where things kind of get away from him and he loses that sort of artistic touch that I think is important to his ability to thrive as an artist. As far as this movie goes, without giving too deep into the weeds here, this is a sort of, I guess, Brian De Palma-esque thriller without sort of the sexual tension, more the voyeuristic tension of father and his daughter. The father is Josh Hartnett, and they're going to a concert for the hot new pop star sensation named Lady Raven, who is played by M. Night Shyamalan's daughter, who is also acting in the film and doing her own original music. And it's for, I would say, like maybe like 15 or 20 minutes of the film. You're just watching a very kind of sweet, like father-daughter earnest relationship where he's clearly trying to kind of make up for a little bit of lost time, going out of his way to be very accepting and open and having fun with his daughter. But when they're at this concert venue, he keeps noticing that there's like an extra security presence and that there are a lot of like armed guards and things that you don't normally see at a concert, at least not to that extent. And at one point when he's trying to get his daughter a Lady Raven t-shirt, he asks the one vendor like, hey, like what's going on here? There's like, what's all the security presence? And, this guy is just like, well, do you know the butcher, that serial killer that's going around chopping people up? They figured out that he is at this concert and that they're going to, suss him out and then make sure he can't leave and then arrest him. Well, sure enough, can you guess who the killer is, John? This is not a spoiler. This is like revealed pretty early.
It's obviously M. Night Shyamalan's daughter.
Yeah, it's Josh Hartnett. And, he has to kind of like figure out how he can kind of keep it cool and be a good dad and like maneuver and escape out of this elaborate kind of concert venue. And it's very kind of tethered to the premise. It's very pulpy. It's very much M. Night kind of having fun, making something a little bit more structurally kind of loose compared to his other films, I guess. Like it's not really about the gimmick as much as it kind of is just him kind of allowing himself to be confined to this one location and finding kind of unique and fun ways to kind of keep the tension building, to kind of get us into Josh Hartnett's shoes and to find a balance where it's like, you're not really rooting for him necessarily, but you kind of want to see how he's going to work his way out of this. And you know that he's clever and conniving enough to do so.
Yeah, I'd like to see Josh Hartnett get out of this mess, and then he gets out of this mess easily.
More or less, yeah. It's definitely a lot more commercial than I think his more recent films have been. It's not quite as existentially heavy as something like Old or even Knock at the Cabin. So I could see you maybe being a little bit more in line with this one.
Wow. It's not
But-
it's not as complicated. It's kind of for dummies. It's a bit more mainstream. So John,
Well, no,
John,
but what
you
I'm saying-
love this. Old, I get it. Old was a little bit too challenging for you, John. Old was so intense. Oh, you had to think during Old and Knock at the Cabin. Oh, John, I'm sorry. Oh,
Well-
but this is better for you.
What I'm trying to say is that it seems like we just sort of disagree on whether or not he can achieve the sort of more lofty psychoanalytical kind of stuff that's going on with his films. Like I think something like Old, you find it to be not quite able to reach the sort of depth that's striving for. Is that kind of like what you were going for with that Knock at the Cabin?
I get the sense from how you're describing this movie that unlike Old and Knock at the Cabin, I would laugh with this movie and not at it. I think that's what would happen.
I think more or less. I will say though that if I have any real gripe with the movie, and I think overall it is good, and I think it's fun, and it's way more enjoyable than your typical sort of overly bombastic blockbuster that I think has crowded the summer otherwise, is that it gets to a point, and I'm going to try to not say when to avoid spoilers, but it kind of gets to a point where it's like, oh, okay, this seems like the natural conclusion for this story. And then it keeps going a little bit. It's like, oh, okay, like what does M. Night have going on? And it's like, okay, I guess that makes sense. And then it keeps going a little bit more, and it's like, oh, okay, I don't know if we need to keep doing this. And then it keeps going a little bit more to the point where it doesn't ruin it, but it kind of feels like we're almost at the port, but the ship is starting to sink a little bit, and it's not as structurally sound as it was when we were leaving the harbor. And it's just like, I don't need this ship to make it all the way. I just need to get there enough that I can get to land before it sinks. And it's like, it gets a little wobbly by the end. And I think what keeps it working is that Josh Hartnett is fully committed, and he's giving a really, really good nuanced performance. And I think one of the keys to, I think, a good Shyamalan movie is how much a lead actor can kind of sell the Shyamalan-ness of it. You know, like you think about something like, let's just say like Bruce Willis in Unbreakable or Sixth Sense. Like those are kind of moody, ponderous films, but I think his innate screen presence sort of sells that kind of loftiness, the ambition. And on the other end of things, you have something like The Happening, where it's like Mark Wahlberg and Zoe Deschanel, fine actors in their own right, not really selling the sort of like B-movie goofiness that's supposed to be on hand. They're playing a little bit too straight. It's not quite as winking, maybe, or I don't know. I'm not really sure how that movie would work necessarily, but it's just clear that they are miscast and it just doesn't work. And I guess you could say the same thing about After Earth, or definitely could say the same thing about Last Airbender. But I think, you know, his last few films have really benefited from, in my opinion, from really good casting. I mean, I think we see that in Old, and we definitely saw that with Dave Bautista in particular in Knock at the Cabin.
Yeah, I have no complaints about the casting in those movies. I'll give you that.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I think Josh Hartnett, you know, he's kind of on a heart renaissance or whatever you want to call it.
I was about to ask if you think that, yeah, because recently was in The Bear, had a good role in that.
Oh, really?
He was, okay, yeah. Well, you would know if you would watch The Bear.
Sure. Okay, I was going to say, I know with Oppenheimer that he's kind of been back in the limelight.
He had a small role in that. Yeah, he was in Wrath of Man. You know, he had a little bit of a fun role in that one too.
Yeah, he was fun in that. Yeah.
Yeah. And his next movie, he's going to be the next James Franco directed movie. That's the one with The Long Home. That has Josh Hutcherson, Tim Blake Nelson.
John, that movie is, I don't think, coming out. That was filmed like a while ago.
But it was completed, Blastion.
I know. But like,
Courtney Love is in it. Do you not believe?
Well, no, John, like, not to bring up a bummer subject, but like, that's the movie where like the allegations with James Franco, like, I think they're kind of circling around that film. So it's like, that movie is probably not going to come out.
Look, it's been 9 years. I'm holding out for 10.
All right. Well, you could do you. I mean, you never know. Maybe I will say there's always a home.
Double feature with Louis C.K.'s I Love You, Daddy.
Sure. I think I Love You, Daddy has a better chance of being released in that movie, maybe. At least officially. But nevertheless, I will say there's always a home at Tubi. You never know what's going to be on Tubi one day. So
I'm just saying.
In any case, Trap. A lot of fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Okay. What?
Good, well-made, clever, pulpy entertainment. Just got to be a little forgiving of the end, I think. If you're willing to indulge maybe it going a little too long in the tooth. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with this and enjoy it.
I'm still not sure if I should watch it. So how about this? We'll go through what some friends of the show had to say about the movie and see if they will convince me. They can finish what you started, Will Ashton. How about that? Amanda the Jedi will go first. So she said, as a thriller, it's a 2. As a comedy, it's a 4.
Okay.
I
will say,
is that fair?
The reactions to this movie have been very interesting to me because they're sort of all over the place. Not only in terms of like whether people liked it or not, but like just having kind of wildly divergent opinions on whether or not certain things work or don't. I don't know. I think it really does. It keeps your attention and it keeps your suspense, I think. So I do think it works as a thriller, but I think it also works as a dark comedy. So I'll have to half agree with Amanda the Jedi on that one.
Okay. Chris Evangelista, another friend of the show, said, yes, all caps, ha, 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 yes, in italics. Pretty good.
Sickos.
Yeah,
are
the sickos
enjoying it
meme.
for sure. Yeah,
I like it. Buddy O said, Josh Hartnett's that tall MFer who stands in front of you halfway through a concert and ruins your experience.
Yeah, I mean,
that's close to selling me.
Without getting into some of the more plotty elements, his character does enter and leave the concert a bunch. And I can imagine being behind him is like, oh, thank God that tall guy left. I can finally see what's going on. Oh, no, he's back. Oh, damn it. Oh, wait, he left again. Just like, yeah.
Diego Andaluz said, instead of expanding its scope as the film goes on, Shyamalan subverts the expectations we have for him by masterfully contracting the scope with each turn until we arrive at a riveting, tense family drama, the best M. Night film of the 2020s. Do you agree? Best? Well, I feel like Old would be your favorite of the 2020s if I had a venture.
I would say, yeah. But I do really think, like I said, the fact that he's been able to make, like I said, the sort of unofficial trilogy of, and I don't know if it's pandemic based or just where his headspace is or what have you. But yeah, just like these 3 movies are sort of secluded to primarily one location, focused on these parental figures put to extreme circumstances and kind of put to different tests. Yeah, I mean, I think I could easily see people liking this one the most of the 3. It'd be very interesting if someone were to like actually, have a fond opinion on at least 2 of these, where they would stand as far as like which one's the best or the worst. But yeah, I would say Old is my favorite of the 3 so far. But yeah, I mean, I could definitely see someone liking Trap the most easily.
Okay. Emma Sasic said, this movie is so goofy and messy, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a fun time watching it. Everything started out so strong, but it unravels once you get to the 3rd act. There were also like 15 possible ending points to this movie. It just kept going on and on after a certain moment. Thank God Josh Hartnett was leading this because he nailed the dual personas so well. It was such a joy to watch. Seleka Shyamalan, you wrote and sang some bangers, but girl, you are so bad at acting. LOL. This sounds pretty in line with your opinion, Will, in terms of the ending.
Sure. I do think Shyamalan, I don't know. Like, I get people get annoyed by the cameos and stuff. I think he's getting a little bit better at acting. I think he's actually pretty solid and Old as far as like acting performance goes. And this, it's a pretty minor role, so it's like he's fine. It's not like he does any better or worse. And I will say, like, for as much as people deride his cameos, it's like he's better acting than like Quentin Tarantino or something. Like his cameos in his movies are much worse.
Matt Donato, once again, he's on a review binge. He said, Trap has the most early 2000s ass theatrical vibes I've seen in a hot minute. It was really on the movie side for the first half, but that second half un-effing ravels. Josh Hartnett devours his role, continual treat. It's twisty, thrilling, but a mess. Hell yeah-ish. So there you go. And Aaron Dicer said, I'm so far in the tank for M. Night at this point that I thought I'd be the only one having fun with this. With all its obvious plot holes and nonsense character decisions, glad to be wrong. Night is a genre at this point. Shakespearean in reach and delightful in execution. Never stop, Mr. Shyamalan. Never, ever stop. That's fun to consider. M. Night Shyamalan being his own genre. I mean, I believe that. I think we've kind of alluded to that before. Because if not a genre, at least a subgenre or like a mood, a very specific vibe that nobody really could imitate effectively like he does.
I mean, I think there was a thing where like in the early 2000s, he was labeled like the next Spielberg.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's not like I get where they were coming from at that time. But like I said, like I feel like where his style evolved and in some respects devolved.
You can say diverged.
Diverged.
Right.
Is that like I think he very clearly is trying to make more heightened kind of surrealist films. And like, I think people sort of have this expectation that movies are supposed to have more naturalistic acting and writing. And so like when they see someone like Nicolas Cage, who, by the way, I would love, honestly, to see Nicolas Cage and M. Night Shyamalan do a collaboration. I think there'd be something really, really fun there. That's just, throwing that out in the ether, see what happens. But yeah, I think he doesn't always pull it off. I think he is trying to do something, a little bit more structurally ambitious as far as like not making something that's tethered to reality, kind of making these sort of like feature length Twilight Zone kind of things. And, I mean, if you're on its wavelength or not, like I said, I think he's made good films and I think he's made bad films. Like it's like any filmmaker, really. But yeah, I think he is kind of really settling into a groove right now and feels super confident in his style and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. I hope this quality continues. Like I've been with it since old, and I was really rejuvenated by Split. It's just Glass, I think, that of the recent stuff I didn't like. I was a little so on, but yeah, I think that there is some truth to be said there.
Abby Old Chessie, not just an old friend of the show, but an old co-host of the show, said that Lady Raven sure is a star. Go see this in the theater with people you trust to be on the level. It's a delight. And then Ryan Oliver, a fellow friend of the show, said, knowing that this didn't screen for critics, I approached the film excitedly as one could to a new M. Night film coming out on their birthday, but also cautiously either worrying that the film was going to be unwatchable, a common theme among films not screened for press, or wondering if it was going to have some crazy twist that M. Night and Warner Brothers wanted to keep a lid on. To my surprise, it was neither. Even more surprising, it's probably Shyamalan's most straightforward film. It trades in a lot of his weird idiosyncrasies for more imitation of Hitchcockian suspense, not unwelcome as he directs the hell out of it, and brought along frequent Pichapong Wirsakatu and Luca Guadagnino collaborator Sayambu Mudagapram to respectively shoot the hell out of it.
Yes.
Which you can perhaps tell based on how you felt about Old and A Knock at the Cabin, where you will land on this one. Personally, I was more on board the risk being taken and the ambition presented in those films, even in the moments where they stumble, but as a taut thriller, Trap is still effective, just perhaps not as unique. In any case, outside of M. Night's formal execution, this largely rests on Josh Hartnett's shoulders, and he's just excellent here. If nothing else, this made me want to rewatch De Palma's Raising Cain, and that can't be considered a bad thing. So yeah, some more Brian De Palma, bona fides here. Sounds like you and Ryan Oliver are cooking in the same kitchen.
Sure, yeah. And obviously, I mean, I think, doesn't need to be said, but certainly makes sense. Like, obviously, Hitchcock is, his biggest influence. And like, you could say, these recent films have sort of like a rope quality to them, not in terms of like one continuous take or several continuous takes, but just rather like characters in these sort of heightened situations. And this has like, like the idea of like, two characters in that movie having, nefarious means and trying to keep this secret, and then like people around them are trying to like figure out what's going on, all that stuff. So yeah, I do really enjoy, like I said, this kind of more ambitious but also personal side to M. Night. I do really love the cinematography as well, and I'm glad that you read from that review that the highlight that. I think that's really, it's so cool that he got him, traditional art house cinematographer to not only shoot this on film, but like, bring it to like a mainstream theater. It looks awesome. It's really, it's worth the theatrical experience just for the pure look of it alone, I think. And so, yeah, I think it's awesome.
I'm getting close to convinced. Corey Everett, who technically hasn't been on Cinemaholics, but we have collaborated with him before. He's a creator, Cinephile, the movie board game, card game thing. He said, I'm generally a fan of the Shyamalan 2.0 era, and I had fun with this, but legitimately one of the dumbest movies I have ever seen. Maybe this movie was just an undercover operation, so his very talented daughter could be a pop star? A little harsh, harsher than we've seen, but worth pointing out. Kimber Myers said, all caps, hey, Lee Mills. This is a very stupid, but a pretty fun time. Good for Josh Hartnett and everyone who loved him when they were young. That includes me, Will Ashton. I'll never forget Pearl Harbor. How could I? And then, do we have any more? Oh, no. Yeah, we do. We have Corey Woodruff. But Corey wrote kind of a more spoilery one. So I'll try to read through this without the spoilers there. He says, only M. Night Shyamalan could pull off making a movie about a sadistic serial killer like this. So I'm trying to cover off spoilers here. Well, I guess you already gave away, actually. Sadistic serial killer who's also just trying to be a good dad. So you did give that away. Movie of the summer. I was rooting for Josh Hartnett to make it out of that concert, and I felt terrible for it, which means this is a great movie. The unbelievably taut atmosphere, the friendly father vibes so effortlessly flowing into the deranged killer grin, the way Shyamalan plays with the main set piece and finds ways to interject humor into the breathless tension, that gun punch of an ending where you feel kind of sorry for, I'm going to move away from this. This is the purest cinematic experience I've had at the movies since Furiosa, which makes this also the best thing I've seen since then. Riveting, devious, joyful, absolutely the best of Shyamalan's filmography since his early 2000s run. If you can't let go of your CinemaSins nonsense for one night, don't bother. You do not deserve the ride of the year. Man, Corey came to this movie and he did not mince words. He said this movie did what it needed to do for him. There we go. Clint Worthington said very crispy. I think that makes sense. And then that might be of course, Will Ashton, who wrote Kid Cudi Cameo of the Year. Can't forget you.
Yes. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I should dive into that, but Kid Cudi, very, very funny cameo in this. I would recommend for you, John, if you watch nothing else, and watch a YouTube highlight reel of his cameo in a few months, because it's a lot of fun.
All right, well, let's finish with the Rotten Tomatoes game real quick. Well, actually, we have 176 reviews counted for Trap. This movie came out a bit ago, so should be pretty firm. What do you think the Rotten Tomatoes score is at this point? I would imagine you might have been spoiled on it at one point.
I was spoiled initially, like what the original opening weekend Rotten Tomatoes score was. I imagine it probably has gone up a little bit since then, but I don't know for sure.
What was the score that you got spoiled on?
I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like 46% or something like that.
Okay.
And originally, I think since then it's probably gotten up into the 50s. Because like I said, I think it really is just one of those cases where some people like it, some people don't. Like, it's kind of your classic like mixed bag reviews, just based on the people I follow and people I've talked to, both in terms of critics, as you've been reading, and audiences. I think it's like, I'm going to say 52%.
So close, Wash, and so close. 55. Only up by a couple. What about audience score? We have 1,000+ verified ratings. What do you think?
Oh boy. Okay, this is even tougher. I think audiences generally, I don't know, because it's hard to say, because like there's still people who are doing like the dumb like Shyamalan ding dong stuff that's like so annoying and kind of racist at this point. Thing where it's just like they're writing it off because it's M. Night Shyamalan, even though he's kind of gotten better, I think. But I don't know. At the same time, I do think people just like to be entertained, and I think this movie, if you go into it with no preloaded expectations and are just trying to have fun and can excuse some of the stupid stuff that happens, I could see them enjoying it. So I'm gonna say still mixed, but more positive than not. I'm gonna say 64%.
Even closer. You're just one off, Will Ashton. It's 65.
Oh wow, okay. So I'm in the right ballpark then.
Yeah, your analysis, your reasoning, it's all there. And then of course Cinema Score. Let's see if you get this one exactly right. What do you think? Cinema Score, of course, the letter grade scale.
It's hard to I don't know. This one I think it's going to be, just because of the ending, I think people are going to be a little underwhelmed overall because it doesn't fully stick the landing. I'm going to say this is like a C+.
You did it. All right. You got that one spot on. C+ is correct. Yes.
Nice.
There you go. Yeah, this is a tough one. On Letterboxd, we have 171,000 watches, most of anything we've talked about today. But average rating, what do you think?
Jeez. I think it's going to be 3.1.
Just a little bit off. You're very close. 2.9. A little bit lower.
Okay. I did hear about that at one point. I thought it might have gone up at one point, but
I get it. This feels like it could go either way with the Letterboxd crowd. But all right, hopefully that gives you, the listener, a pretty good wide gamut. I mean, we gave you lots of differing and consensus takes on this one, but it is Shyamalan. I feel like that's always he's a tough guy to crack, but we are going to have a tough time not being able to talk about movies until the next time. That's for sure. But for our next thing, I think we got Alien Romulus coming up next. Looking forward to that. And the summer's kind of winding down. We are in the throes of August. There are a couple of movies still on the horizon. I know you, for some reason, want to talk about Harold and the Purple Crayon. Lord knows why. I still want to see, and I know I'm probably I'm taking too long on this. I really want to see Twisters, and I got to see it in a theater. And I don't know if the listeners would care if we talked about Twisters on the show as like a super late review, but I'm for it. But I mean, are you into it? Do you like the idea?
Yeah, it's our show. We can do whatever the heck we want.
I thought you were going to cuss. I was sweating.
Oh, man.
But okay, it sounds good. So we'll keep that up in the air for sure. Hopefully we will be able to make some final decisions on that soon. But yeah,
will say, so I think it ends with us like well eclipsed expectations. Like it made like $50 million this weekend or something crazy like that.
Not sure.
I don't know, but I think you're pretty off the air. You've been pretty firm. Like you're not going to see that movie.
Yeah,
no, you don't want to.
I despise the book. I just it's. I hate everything about it. I hate what it's done to like the publishing industry, honestly. And I have nothing against the author, Colleen Hoover. It's just, I don't even want to get into it.
Well, I just bring that up to say, don't expect, I guess, a like Where the Crawdad Sings review for us, even though this is kind of like this year's Where the Crawdad Sings, where it's like the
much
literary adaptation.
And not even that good of a book, but I mean, I have no interest. But yeah, there's other stuff. There's other stuff that we can get into as we transition into, award season's going to be kicking off pretty soon. We have TIFF coming up and, plenty of stuff coming. So if you have any feedback for us, as always, our email is cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com if you want to hit us up or join the Discord. You can check out the In Between Drafts Discord. Cinemaholics has its own channel. And if you like our show, leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Please do. It helps us out and very easy to do. And if you've already done it, hey, thanks. Appreciate it. But that'll do it for us this week. Thanks for listening. As always, I'm John Grimm from the Internet California.
And I'm Will Ashton from the Internet Pennsylvania.
See you next time.
Yeah, check it. Yeah, goodbye.